Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, and those of you not of age that had to get permission from your parents to watch this podcast, which is a weird thing for me to have to say, but look, I'm saying it. It's Rick. I'm back today with the Sound Horizons podcast brought to you by TuneTrack. And once again, we have another amazing guest, another sojourner, if you will, in this journey of music that we all love and are interested in. Now, today's guest is a household. Look, we do a lot of household names. It's a household name. You all know him. You all love him. He's like that extended family member we all have and trust. And I think today we're going to get to the bottom of why he's the easiest person in the world to not only like, but to listen to and communicate with as well. No further explanation needed. One of the EGOTs of our industry, your friend, my friend. Please welcome Mitch Gallagher to the podcast today. Hello, Mitch Gallagher today.
Rick, great to see you.
Oh man, that's the lie, and you know it. So,
that was quite an intro.
Yeah,
man. Wow,
that's a lie. No one. I'm like death. No one is happy. They're like, oh no, it's Rick. Oh crap. So there are so many places we could start, and your career. I don't even know if you're aware of how amazing. When I think about your career. You have all of these different, you have all of the you've done all of the things. It's very rare that I talk to someone who's had an opportunity to do as many of because our industry is big and there's lots of ways you can go about earning a living and journeying through it. But for whatever reason, you're like, I could pick one, but what I'll do is all of them, sometimes all at once. So I think if I go back to the beginning, a lot of this for you, my understanding, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you had some music in the house when you were younger, musical family, but you ultimately made a decision that a lot of our listeners make, and you went to school for music. You pursued music educationally first, and I was curious as you look on where your career is now. The education is very different now than it was when you and I were being educated. So, how much of an influence did that part? Not on. I know you went specifically guitar instrument. There's always that, but just the education process, how much of that influenced sort of how your journey at least sort of ended up?
Wow. So I trying to get the story straight in my head, because what I did was started playing guitar in high school, started playing in bands, and went to school for electrical engineering first and studied that for a couple of years and decided that wasn't the route that I wanted to take. And so I went on the road with a band. And so I was on the road for a couple of years playing rock and then country. I was doing the hotel circuit thing, doing that 7 nights a week. And at some point realized that wasn't where I wanted to end up doing that. And so I decided to go back to school, and it took me a few tries to end up at music. So I went back, and at first it was like I was studying chemistry or something, and then computer science for a little while, and then business for a little while, and none of those were really clicking. And
Sure.
So just realized that, man, music's the way I got to go. And so that was when I started pursuing a degree in music, and eventually went on and did some graduate studies as well. But things were, like you say, different then. There was no internet. There was no YouTube to learn things from. You either learned it on your own, or you took lessons, or you were an apprentice, or you went to school. And I had in the back of my mind one of two different paths that I wanted to pursue, or maybe three. One, I thought about being a studio guitarist. And so I started studying electric guitar. I took multiple lessons a week and studied that in school, but also studied classical guitar. I wanted to have a good background in reading and theory and understanding that. But as part of that, I got into composing. And so I started studying some composition, got into electronic music, started studying MIDI and all those kind of things. And so it just kept expanding from there. And it's funny how all that stuff comes back around, which is exactly what you were saying. I look back now and was like, why did I even get into doing that? Or why was I, but now it ended up that studying MIDI and getting into electronic music and everything led to being technical editor at Keyboard Magazine, and all those kind of things just lead places, and so you never know.
Well, and that is another big facet of your career, is so you have this I think that's the big jump for me in my mind, where it's like, well, he's a player, he's this amazing guitar player, and that's how we know you now. But I'm sure you start like everyone else, but you're doing the work, you're on the road, you know what it's like you said, to play the thankless gigs 7 nights a week to earn the meager
Right.
paycheck. But then you've sort of transitioned to it's very common now, to your point from earlier, with the way the internet has sort of grown over the past 20 years. um for that word content, we throw it around a lot, and it means a lot of things. But
Hmm.
again, when we go back to the fact that there was a time when if you wanted to learn something, you had to learn it from someone, or if
Yeah.
you needed information, you had to read it in something. And the people in charge of those things, editors, like, so you're on this journey as a player, but then you find yourself as an editor. And that is where's the piece there where you go from music to actually looking at what would have been the content of the time and saying,
Hmm.
hey, what this is good, this isn't good, we need to do more. Where's that bridge?
So, um, I was always the guy in the band that ran the PA and set up the lights and wired stuff up and did the troubleshooting and all that kind of stuff. And along the way, I really got into the technology of it all. Right. And I had a studio. I'd done all of those kind of things, and was still, even when I was in graduate school in Kansas City, I was running sound for bands. I had a home studio. I was doing parody songs for a local radio station. I've got all
Awesome.
that stuff that,
Yes.
that a musician does while you're going to school and teaching guitar lessons. And I was doing all of it, what we all do to make a living and to get through all that stuff. Um, Eventually, I recognized that I didn't want to. I didn't want to pursue being an academic. I wanted to pursue other directions, and so I got almost finished with my master's and decided to take a different path, and that path led me to Sweetwater. And through being at Sweetwater, I got even more into the technology and deeper into things. But the second side of that is I've always been a voracious reader.
Hmm.
And starting from a very, very young age, I'd bring home, 10 books every 2 weeks from the library and plow through them and just was so into that aspect of things as well. So fast forward a few years, and I'm looking in the back of Mix magazine because I read all the magazines. That was how I educated myself and got into all that stuff. And saw a little ad. I think it was Mix or maybe it was Keyboard. Saw a little ad that they were looking for an assistant editor, an editorial assistant, or one of those jobs. And so I was like, man, I grew up with Guitar Player. I grew up with Keyboard, and I love those magazines. And it was always a dream of mine to be at those magazines to
Hmm.
do that. And so I reached out to them, and they're like, well, an editorial assistant really is an office position, but and you're way overqualified for that. But we have this opening for a technical editor. Would you be interested in applying for that? And so I did, and ended up getting the job. And then in 1998, I moved to San Francisco to be the technical editor and later senior technical editor at Keyboard Magazine. But I think that grew out of those three different thrusts, one being so into music, two being so into technology, and three being just a voracious reader. And I had done a lot of writing along the way, little things here and there, and nothing that was ever published up to that point. But I had been doing a lot of writing. And I got there and started working with the amazing people that were there. People like Jim Aiken and Mark Vale and the Greg Rule, the whole Ernie Rideout, the whole staff that was at Keyboard at that time was so fantastic. It was really the end of the glory age of the music magazines in my mind, anyway. Those up until about 2005. And so they taught me a lot. I learned so much from them about being an editor and being a writer. And I mean, I got thrown in right into the deep end. I think I showed up there at the end of January, and like the next Wednesday, I was at the NAM show.
Wow.
Learning my way around and trying to figure out how to do all that stuff and how to write it all up. And then right after that, one of the first stories I did was going down to Los Angeles to Media Ventures, which was Hans Zimmer's group that he had
Hmm.
put together with Jeff Rona and Gregson Williams, and all these composers were kind of forming this conglomerate, which was super cool. So I kind of got thrown into the deep end, and that's sort of been the trajectory. Is I rarely say no, and if an opportunity comes up, I mean, I'm always game to try it, and just drop me in the deep end, and hopefully I won't sink.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that time frame, so that late '90s, which was sort of the post ADAT revolution. But I mean,
Mhm.
technology. What an amazing time! Things were changing very rapidly with the DAWs and digital technology and synthesis and computers. What was it like from a I guess this could be the wrong word, but like from a responsibility standpoint, when you're in the media at that point in time, this is the only outlet for information. Did
Yeah.
you feel a pressure to have to be on top of the latest, greatest, newest? As soon as it came out, you guys needed to be first to go because if you weren't, someone else would. Was that a real thing that when we see it in the movies and you hear stories about it, but you were there? Was that is that what it was like?
Yeah, I mean that was what it was like, and I had like I said about things coming back around. I had enough of an electrical engineering background to understand a little bit of that side of the technology. I'd had enough of the computer science and the MIDI programming, and even studied some C sound, which is a computer audio language, and so I had enough of that background, and uh, I started at Sweetwater in '92 as a sales engineer, and so I immersed myself in the information and tried to be a great resource for my customers. And so I was taking all that knowledge I had built up, all these back things from school and from experience on the road and stuff, and brought all that together, and sat down and was in a pretty good position to be able to absorb a lot as the revolution occurred, the home studio revolution occurred. But that's a very long way to answer your question, to
That's
say that
okay.
absolutely. I mean, we were one of the sources for that kind of thing. And Marvin Sanders, who was the editor in chief at that time, was really focused on the home studio revolution and what that meant for keyboard players, and getting into all the software. And I remember seeing the very first demos of Pro Tools. I remember seeing the very first virtual instruments that came out. And some of those things that were going on, and did feel a real responsibility for that. I remember doing. Oh, it must have been maybe the second year I was at keyboard. I did a roundup shootout of all the what became DAWs at that time. So it was Studio Vision and Digital Performer and Cubase, and I think it was Logic by that point. It had
E-Magic,
moved from
yeah. Wow.
Creator. Yeah. I had a stack of manuals that was literally 5 feet tall on the floor of my office, because everything was printed then, right? And
Sure.
every one of those came with a main manual like that, and then there were all these auxiliary manuals and stuff, because it was all, you couldn't look it up on Wikipedia. It wasn't
No.
there. And so, just being a sponge and absolutely feeling a responsibility to try to convey as much as I could to the readers.
Did you find at that time that the magazine industry, as far as audio goes, was it competitive? Did you look at the other magazines as competitors, or was it more of a family vibe?
Um, it's funny, at that time, the different magazines were owned by different companies. As it evolved to getting to 2005, they all
Right.
became owned by basically one company. So I'm sure things changed by that point. At that time, certainly, we were trying to get out first. We wanted to have the best information. We wanted to be accurate, and we wanted to hit the stands with our stuff before anybody else did. So yeah, there's a friendly competition. I'm still friends with all those people, and they're all great.
And I feel like, to your point, which was a great point, that as they all started out as their own entities, they also had their own very specific lane. Like this is really what our magazine's going to do, and we're going to leave the other stuff. But then it seemed, at least a little bit after the big New Bay consolidation in the early 2000s, that a lot of the magazines, there was a lot of more bleed and crossover, to where magazines that used to be very myopic in their focus started to expand a little bit. But as you're looking at it objectively, again, you're in this rare position where you've been able to contribute, even though I hate the word, it is the only accurate word, to the content landscape in our.
Right.
When you look at how easy it is for a musician of any skill level to learn something or get information on something now, do you ever just stop and think to yourself, what was it all for? What did if we knew it was going to end up here, what the hell did we do all this? I'm sure there were sleepless nights and, like you said, hard work, but it's like, what was it all for if it was all just going to be here?
Yeah. Well, everything changes.
Sure.
You got to ride with the waves as they go. And I still think it's important to make music. And, even though that whole industry has changed, and that side of it is different, the creation of the art is really the focus, and should be the joy and the purpose of what you're doing. And so I'm thrilled to support that in any way that I can. And I love the more democratic landscape that we have now, where anybody can make music and things. Interesting, to your point, you were talking about how they all kind of became more homogenized, the different. I think what also happened, though, was the readers did,
Mm,
because at one point in the '70s or '80s, even, you were a guitar player.
Yeah.
and you were a keyboard player and you were a drummer. But as we got further and further into the 90s, and certainly as we've crossed into the 2000s, you can't just be a guitar player anymore. You've got to be a guitar player who can record guitar and who can, you've got to be able to do all of these things. And the home studio has become such a focus for all of that, that
Mm.
the magazines kind of had to evolve. You had to, if you're a guitar magazine, you still have to talk about recording guitar because everybody's doing it now. In the 70s and 80s, you weren't. You were lucky if you had a 4-track cassette recorder that you could maybe lay some things down on if you could manage to record your Marshall stack,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, exactly.
into your Porta studio,
Well, as a guitar player, I mean that's your love, that's your primary, that's your what I call your community instrument. That's what brought you to the dance. Were you
Yeah.
harder, do you think, throughout, or do you generally hold a higher standard for guitar products as you're teaching, evolving, trying things, or do you try and treat everything equally, or do you look at it as a guitar player going, okay, I'm coming at this from a personal, this is a personal level. I kind of add that.
I would say that I split it. Certainly, I have the things that personally I am really excited about for me and that I want to use and that suit what I do is probably more accurate.
Mm.
But I also um, I try to be conscious of the fact that pretty much any product at any level, there is a customer for that product and a reason why that product is right for that customer. So what I try to do is find that.
Mm.
Who is the customer? Why is it right for them? What's it going to do for them? Why is it good in that
Sure.
standpoint? And really try to take that kind of a perspective on it versus, oh, I'm too cool for that, because that's just not true. It's also I mean, you're obviously well aware of this, is things have all got everything's gotten so great.
Yeah.
No matter
Well,
what price point you're at, I mean, things are fantastic.
it's
It's
not
compared.
even fair. Again, to your point, I remember being a young man, just you would be happy to get an instrument, let alone care about what it was made out of or where it was manufactured. I mean, as long
Yep,
as you got the finish you wanted and it worked, you were happy. And then we've become
yep.
so spoiled as that is not our industry, just as a civilization, things are so not hunter gatherer anymore and just so wait in line for 20 minutes for coffee, right? So it's we have a different set of complaints now. I'm curious
Right.
though, given the fact that through your career you've been exposed to all of this great gear, and a lot of times months, weeks, years before the regular folk. Can
Mhm.
you recall any time in your career at any point where there was something that you were introduced to and you thought to yourself audibly, okay, this changes everything. This changes everything.
Oh boy, there have been a lot actually. The 90s was huge, I think, in revolutionary products. But even before that, when I was in college, I was teaching 30 students a week and playing every weekend and doing all the stuff we were talking about. And the people at the music store recognized that I had kind of a technological or technical bent to myself as well. And so they got this new box in that was called a MIDI interface and this little piece of software. I think it was a company called Sonus, not Sonus with two U's that's around now, but with one U. And it was a little MIDI sequencer that ran on a Commodore 64
Wow.
and interface for that. And they said, we don't know what to do with this. Take it home, plug it in. If you can figure it out and tell us something about it, all good or whatever. And so even something like that, I remember having that and getting a Casio CZ101 and a MIDI bass, a 360 Systems MIDI bass, and a DX100 were the extent of my budget at that point,
Wow.
making this little MIDI studio and being able to sit there in my basement apartment at school, and I had a PV XR600 PA head and two realistic PA speakers.
Ooh,
And that was my studio in those days,
nice.
and but what a revelation to be able to sit there and have music, put music in and have music play back and be able to write music and play my guitar along with it. And I would load all that stuff up and take it into the school's recording studio and, lay the MIDI tracks down on an 8-track tape recorder, analog tape recorder, and then lay a guitar track on top. And it was like, how's this even possible? This is so amazing. So, I mean, dating back to then, but I mean, the ADAT was huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Ensoniq Mirage when that came out was huge. I mean, these things just changed. There were the high end things. There were the K250 that Sweetwater was so based on, but there was the Mirage and there was the like when the Proteus came out and some of these different synthesizer modules that were affordable sounded great and could do things, that you just
Yeah.
couldn't do in the past. And of course, like I said, I remember the very first demo of Studio Vision. because I was familiar with Vision from Opcode, which
Hmm.
was a fantastic sequencer. And I remember the rep came in and was like, "You got to check this out." Plugs a microphone in and records a track into this MIDI sequencer, and you're like, "What?
Yeah.
This is like
And you can see it. You're
unbelievable!"
watching
And you
it.
can see it, and you can cut it, and you can really. I mean, that was just amazing. And then the first demo of Pro Tools, and when I was at keyboard, I remember the very first. Virtual instruments came in, and you could play these instruments, and there was a system called Beatnik that allowed you to remote work together, collaborate, with MIDI data. You couldn't do audio in those days. Nothing was fast enough to do that. But so all these things have just been just amazing,
So,
to
with that in mind, though, now you've seen it all, right? So, how do you stay interested in anything new? How does the
Hmm.
first thought that goes through your mind go, oh, been here 20 years ago, next? I mean, because that would be how
Yeah.
most people treat it. How do you stay engaged in what's happening now?
I think there's still so much cool stuff going on. I just actually last night and even this morning I was downloading Complete 15, and I mean there's so much in there and so many cool sounds and so much processing. And I mean I know this isn't specifically Tune Track, but the stuff you guys are doing with Easy Bass and Easy Drummer and being able to have these grooves and all, I get so excited. It's like how can I use this to make music? That's really why I stay excited about it.
Hmm.
Because how is this going to affect my music? How's it going to get better? How's it going to sound better? What's this going to let me do? Um, I have a little bit of a sound design background, and so new sounds fascinate me, and technology just fascinates me, and so I'm always excited. I get excited just talking about it.
We're grateful that you do. So here's another, just an observation. So you had mentioned you started your education journey and your music journey had already, you're playing in high school, and you're doing a thing. But I mean, obviously, electrical engineering, biology, math, like reading this academia that you look at,
Mhm.
particularly math, right? With engineering and even biology, do you find that your interest in math helped or has assisted in your sort of absorption and knowledge and understanding of music? Because I think that math is this component of music that doesn't get talked about a lot unless you're actually in school, and how the universal, the two are very, very related. And generally, people that tend to be good at one can gravitate to being really good at the other. So I was curious if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that well, I mean, I was sort of a weird hybrid in high school. I was the nerd that was in science fairs and doing all of that kind of stuff, but then I also played football and was on the wrestling team and played
Sure.
baseball, and so I was that kind of hybrid
You were the
nerd of
day
all.
walker. I like it.
But I especially people who have a technical side to them and are into that kind of stuff. I think the math um, influences that, and maybe it's not so directly the math, although I'm going to come back to that. And maybe it's more the logical way your mind works and the organized way that your mind has to work to be successful at doing math and
Mhm.
understanding math. Um, I see that carrying over to troubleshooting, to how you set things up and how you arrange things and how you organize things. I think that's a part of it, both from a technical standpoint of your gear, but also how you approach your music. The ultimate example I can give you of that is when I was in graduate school, I wrote a series of pieces of music that ended up winning a NARAS award, um, based on the Fibonacci number series. And so I was just fascinated by, I mean, how nerdy is that, right? I'm sitting around playing with this Fibonacci number series, and I'm like, wait, if I do this every 24 iterations, this sequence repeats. And so, man, maybe I could apply that to the notes
Wow.
and make melodies and do a composition. And so I did three different compositions, three different movements of this one composition, actually, that were all derived from the Fibonacci number series, which is you're given 0 and 1. And the idea is that you add the two preceding numbers to get the third. So you have 0 and 1 that you're given, you add 0 and 1 and you get 1. And then you add 1 and 1, you get 2. You add 1 and 2, you get 3. 2 and 3, you get 5. 3 and 5, you get 8. And ad infinitum.
Yeah.
But if you think about it in terms of 12 steps, it repeats every 24 iterations.
Sure.
And so I was able to apply that to what they call a tone row in 20th century composition, and create these pieces of music that were I liked them. I thought they were fun. And so that aspect of applying math is also a thing that you can do creatively, which is it can be fun if you're that big of a nerd.
And so did that also, I don't think you have to be a nerd. I mean, I think I think creativity is where you find it. And like you had alluded to, if your mind is already predisposed to organize information and facts a certain way, I do
Hmm.
think there's a path that a lot of people like that take. And I think that you generally tend to find, like you had mentioned earlier, there's a customer for everything. There's an audience for everything. And again, that neurology, I think we don't spend enough time looking inward. Like at one particular point in time, I had to ask myself about my Kiss obsession, and I had to say, "What is wrong with you? That this is out of all the music that's ever existed in the world, and all the music you've ever listened to, and all of these things, why do you come back to this one thing?" And there's a million different reasons, but it's very similar to why some people like rock and roll, why people like jazz, why people like pop. There's more going on in this little gray matter in between our ears than we think. And I find that people that have had the opportunity to experience the educational system, oftentimes when it comes to music education, are a little bit better of being in touch with why they like the things they do, and then they tend to find the different versions of the things they do. Like in your instance, so you already knew you liked reading, you were already math oriented, you loved music, so why not? You've got these options. I'm curious because again, as a guitar player, at some point in time, you're like, you know what I should do? My life's not complicated or busy enough. I should study classical guitar. Let's do that because that's the easiest part of guitar. Like if you're going to play guitar, why bother with A chords and 12-bar blues when I could completely and thoroughly destroy any hope I have at thinking I'm good at anything by pursuing a classical? What was the impetus for the classical guitar journey?
That started when I went to school, and you had to have a instrument that you played. So I was ended up designing my own program. It was a Bachelor of Arts, and which is fairly common. It's not anything special I did, but you have to have a principal instrument to do that. And classical guitar was one of the things that was offered. And they had electric guitar as well. I don't remember if that was actually considered a principal instrument or you could just take like studio guitar lessons. I don't recall, but that also goes back to in when I was younger, listening to Rush and Triumph, and
Mm.
both Rick Emmett and Alex Lifeson played classical guitar and used that in their compositions. And I thought that was so cool that not only could they play these amazing rock parts, but they could also then do these classical guitar parts. And then later I discovered Steve Morse. And with the Dregs, he always played some classical guitar stuff. He'd always have a solo classical guitar thing on there. So I was pretty interested in what this whole classical guitar thing was, and diving into it was a lot of fun. It really was. It's a different discipline. I still have my classical guitar, and I pull it out every now and then. But that's a discipline that if you don't stay on it, it's gone, because it's you really have to have your both hands together to do all that stuff and to make it all work. But I still love taking it out and playing it, and I get asked to play occasionally. I'll go play. Somebody will say, "Can you play at my wedding or something?" And I'll go do that. And it's always a frantic couple of months of trying to get my chops back up and
Well, and
learning how to do.
that world too, to your point. I mean, some of the custom built, one of a kind instruments that
Hmm.
rival everything and anything you could buy at any store. I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
that's a whole other universe of guitar building expertise. The actual craft of building those instruments is just as detailed and disciplined as the craft of learning to play them. So I'm curious, you're done with, you're not done, but once you come out of the classical guitar, how does that change your approach to your regular guitar playing? Because you're a pretty versatile player. You already like rock, you already like blues, jazz. I mean, how does that sort of fuse in
Hmm.
there?
I think two ways. Um, I think that I go back and forth between picking fingers quite a bit. Even
Okay.
though I don't so much in the videos, the demos and stuff that we do, but a lot of the rhythm playing I actually do with fingers,
Hmm.
as opposed to a strumming kind of a thing, depending on the song and all,
Sure.
all that kind of stuff. I think it allows you as a rhythm guitarist to take more of a pianistic approach, in that you can have different voices and you can bring them in and out using finger style approaches to that. And so that influence is there. I think it also um, it gives you more flexibility in your fretboard hand, whether you're right or left-handed, because you're just playing things that aren't natural when you're doing it classical, and you're keeping multiple lines going. That's something that fascinates me,
Hmm.
is how you can have multiple lines going in classical guitar. They'll have, some of the really accomplished players can do, four lines at once, and they're independent lines that you can hear that clearly there are four melodies happening there. And how do you do that? And how do you incorporate some of that into what you're doing is one thing, but then also just listening to a lot of that music and being exposed to it and hearing what you can do with voice leading, with harmonic progressions, with the way things resolve, with just the way that music is put together, I think is different than what we encounter in a lot of rock and jazz and blues and country and things. And the emphasis on different articulations, different dynamics, and really shaping a piece of music is something else that I think is really valuable. You can take away from classical music.
Hmm. Well, and it's a good segue. You're good at segues. It's a good accidental segue. So I want to talk about
Oh,
your music because I think one of the things that also, again, objectively, just from knowing you and watching, one of the things that is always been inspiring about you is a lot of people, understandably, pursue a career in our part of the industry, and their zeal and love for actually performing or playing or recording gets a little sapped because our industry it's wonderful and it's a beautiful. I'm not trying to diss the industry, but like any industry, it can be a lot. You can music all day. The last thing you want to do is go home and look at anything music, but you still manage, like you said, to find that joy and that love. You leasing records, you're still doing things. So my question about your record and some of your music is you have all the options. You're a rarity. So you've got access to all the gear. And throughout your career, you've met all the people. So you have all the people and all the gear. When do you decide to use a person or the gear? How does that work? Or are you so like habitual in the way you do things like, well, this is maybe I talk about all this stuff, but I only make music this way. How does that work for you?
Oh, it doesn't work that way at all.
It's not that simple.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I will tell you the biggest danger in all of that is what I call option anxiety. It's like, oh, I could, maybe I should, maybe I should, maybe I should. Let's try, and never, for a long time, I just never finished anything because it was always trying something and, ooh, shiny,
Yeah,
just that,
exactly.
and that can be a real danger. Um, so when my last release, Foundation, came out, what happened with that was, um, I'm always writing music. Just always have ideas. There's always just piles of stuff that are just ideas, and a lot of them are just fragments or whatever. And I have them in folders on the computer or whatever. So I found out that these amazing players were coming to Sweetwater for another session. And it was Keith Carlock, who's the drummer for Steely Dan and Toto and Mike Stern and all these people.
It's a monster.
Yeah, Adam Nitti on bass, who's a studio guy, and I'm drawing a blank on who he plays with. The guy who did the song for Top Gun. Oh, good grief. I'll think of it. Anyway, another major player, the keyboard player named Michael Whitaker, who was an LA film guy and moved to Nashville and still does film stuff there and a lot of sessions and has a studio. So these fantastic players were coming in. And I'm seeing this, and it's a few weeks ahead of time, maybe a month ahead, that I see that they're coming in to do the session. And I'm like, hey, if I reached out to them, I wonder if they'd come out a day early and we could just record some stuff. That'd be kind of fun. And lo and behold, they're like, oh yeah, sure. We're going to be there. We'll just come a day early. We'll go into the studio, and the studio happened to be available that day here at Sweetwater. And so great. Oh, exciting. Oh man, I got to have music. So I sat down and for a month just frantically composed and tried to finish pieces but the cool thing was that there were limitations on it. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get to, is sometimes putting limitations and putting boundaries can really help with that. So first of all, I had a limited time frame to work with because I'm not going to bring these guys in and have unfinished fragments for them to play on, or one song or something, and so that was one thing. But the other thing was that I knew very specifically, now I have drums, bass, keyboards, and my guitar, and that's all we're going to get on that day. And so specifically wrote the parts for that. And then when they came in, they were just brilliant and took it to places that I, could never have imagined, and just added so much to the project. So then I got this thing. I'm like, man, now I got to finish. I've got to finish. And so I went home and started working on my guitar parts at home. And so that was a lot of it, was just, I can either do this or not.
Sure.
And what a waste if I don't. That'd be so disappointing to not, or to get it and then not finish this. Or really?
That's a great perspective. I mean, what a waste if I don't do. I mean, I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm decorating the time. I might as well enjoy myself and do this cool thing while we can. And that's that's the essence of it right there. So you just nailed it. It's like, well, this is how he does it. It's like he made the decision. I want to do it.
Yeah.
This is it. Is it
And it's that opportunity thing of, okay, and I'm going to do this, and there's the deep end. So
so now
start.
that with foundations being great and everyone loves that, so as you think then of like a normal musician, of course you just cannot be happy that you've done something. You have to do something else. So
Mhm,
as you look to the next record, do you
mhm.
have do you feel from an artistic standpoint, I want to do something different than I did with the last one, or do you think this one worked so well, I want to kind of take what worked well and just do a different version of it?
That's a great question. So a couple of things are going on. I'm writing a lot, and part of the reason for that is uh, there's a local club in town called the Club Room, and they have booked my band that did the stuff from Foundation, and we do other jazz stuff and
Yeah.
things. So they booked us the first Wednesday of the month for the last 14 months or so, and we've got
Wow.
the next 4 months booked up. So that has been an incredible test opportunity for
Sure.
me to bring music in and say, hey, let's try this. So I've got 3 songs that are done that we played several times. They're working great. I've got one song that I've done 3 or maybe even 4 different arrangements that I'm still not happy with. And so I can't, we go play and then I go, that didn't work. So go home and change it and rewrite it. And I've got 4 or 5 other ones that are in progress that I'm hoping to take back out the next time we play. And so I think that, they're all kind of in the vein of what I did then because my band is guitar, bass, drums, saxophone,
Mm,
keyboards, uh,
nice.
and they're all great players and I just throw stuff up and they can play it, and so it's so cool to so I make charts for everything. Everything's written out, and then there's a lot of improvisation and stuff as well. So that's similar to what I had with the first album. But it's kind of like and I know you've heard this from artists as well. So they do an album and then they go out on tour and play the songs and they're like, man, I wish I could go back and record the
Of
songs now
course.
because
Yeah.
they're so much better after we've played them 300 times around the
Right.
world. Well, I'm kind of doing that in reverse. I'm getting to play them a bunch of times before, so when I go into the studio, it'll be hopefully pretty well formatted. But I don't know that I'm going to have the opportunity to do. It was so cool on the first one to be able to record as a band. The
Sure.
guitar, bass, drums, and keyboards were all recorded live as a group, and I really wanted to do that. I felt like that was just so important to get the vibe, to get the feel, to get the groove and all that. I'm not sure I can make that happen this time, or if I'll be doing it more. Hey, put drums on this. Hey, put bass on this. So that remains to be seen. But once I have all that recorded, we'll see.
When you're writing and it's just your pure creativity, you're in your studio,
Mhm.
are you writing um with the end in mind? So a lot of people like, so for me, I'll use my, not that anyone asked, not that anyone cares, but if I'm writing something, I don't care about how it will translate live or what I will have to do to translate it live. I'm more interested in the studio as an instrument and doing the big crazy, like the Queen, like just, oh, that doesn't, you're not supposed to be able to do that, let's do that. So
Yeah.
for you, is your process relative to, do you always have the live at the end of your game? Are you like, well, I want to be able to perform this live, and then you tailor the recording to that, or do you just kind of create and try and figure it out later?
On the first one, because we went in and recorded them without ever playing them live, and I really didn't have a band at that time to go out and do them live or a place to play, for that
Right.
style of music at that time either. So in that case, we recorded it, but it was recorded as a live band. So those basic tracks are what I ended up charting for my group now, and then the rest of it's kind of decoration on top of it, all the harmony parts and
Mhm.
all the little bits here and there that you're not going to get those live without playing to tracks or having too many musicians on stage to do it all. This time it's a little different because I'm actually writing for my quintet. And so we're taking it out live and playing it. And I think it's going to be the opposite. I think I'm going to end up with the parts all kind of not nailed down, but laid out and organized and structured. And then I'll put stuff on top of that. But I don't worry that, oh man, there were 3 guitars playing this part here, and so I can't play it live because there's not going to be 3. I find a way to do it, whether it's I'll put a saxophone in doing a harmony instead, or whatever. I mean, there's some parts in oh. There's a song on the album called Finch Food, and there's 3-part guitar harmonies through the melody. And so when I do that live, I can't do those 3 parts. They're moving through chords and stuff.
Sure.
And so I'll put an octave divider on the guitar, so I've got a high and a low note, and then put the saxophone in the middle, and it gives the effect.
Hmm.
You get you get the
You get
effect
it.
of it.
Yeah.
So you find ways to do it.
How hard is it for you to commit to a guitar rig when you're going to go play live? Like, how many hours of you going through every piece of gear you own? Are you like, well, maybe this or maybe that? Or do you just have it like, you know what, like you said, you're so used to the whole analysis paralysis that you just don't even afford yourself that luxury and you just say, nope, I'm just going out with this.
Oh man, it's constant fun and constant hassle.
Yeah.
I think I posted something on my Facebook or something the other day where I used this exact same pedal board twice in a row.
Ooh, it's a world
Which
record.
is yeah, it's like a world record or whatever.
Well, you're known. You love gear. We know you love pedals. Everyone that
I do.
knows anything about it. So again, every musician's going to already knows the answer to this question, but there never is enough, is there? I mean, you think I have all the pedals, and you think you've heard all the pedals. JHS can't even make a cooler pedal than this, and then then there's another cool pedal. So,
Gotta have that. Yeah,
do you recycle gear? Meaning, do you have a rule where if you haven't used it for a certain amount of time, you try and sell it or get rid of it?
yeah. I'm actually doing some of that right now. I call it the occasional purge.
Yeah. Do you think that's healthy for musicians ultimately long term?
Yeah, I find that I'll get to a point like in my studio where it's like I had gotten down to like 8 guitars, and now I go down in the studio and there's more than that. I'm like, I'm not playing these things, and number one, I feel like all that stuff kind of weighs me down
Hmm.
a little bit, but I also almost feel bad that I've got these great instruments and I'm not playing them. Somebody should play them. Somebody should use these things for making music. They're not just sitting there, on a guitar stand. That's sad. And
Yeah.
so I don't like that. If it's something I'm not using, I don't know that I have every year I go through and evaluate, but I'll just reach a boiling point where it's like, I've reached that. This is just too much. I gotta clear this out and get down to what I actually use.
Hmm.
And then I feel good about it. And then, oh wait, I need a new pedal. Oh wait, oh wait, look at that guitar. Or and
So,
then it starts over again.
well, and again, I mean, it's not you had alluded to it earlier. I mean, I don't even think I was thinking about it when you said it that you started with Sweetwater in 1992 because I think
Mhm.
that a lot of people listening to this are like, wait a minute, Sweetwater was around in 1990. I don't think as for as well known as I mean, Sweetwater in your lifetime, you've seen it from the very beginning to like you know, Chuck's house to Death Star. Like, what just happened? How did Sweetwater become the big? And I'm sure again, that's nine other. That'll be another podcast another time. We'll talk shop another time. But as you go through this change, and Sweetwater's always been a part of your life. I mean, for as long as you can remember at this particular point in time.
Big chunk, yeah.
Do you ever think to yourself, what would have happened if I had never taken that gig selling
Absolutely.
Kurzweil K 250s or Kurzweil K 2500s?
Yeah.
And how
No,
different your journey might have been.
Yep. I do think about that. And I have no answer of what it would have been, but you just wonder. I mean, but that's with any path you take. You're always like, well, what if I'd taken the other fork? What if, when I was in high school, I was like, do I go to school, study electrical engineering, or do I go to Berkeley, which was a fairly new music school at the time, and try to study guitar and do all that? And I chose the electrical engineering side. And what would have been different if I'd gone there? Or I had actually I had applied to the University of Miami at Coral Gables, which is
Wow.
where Pat Metheny
Hmm.
and Jocko and I think Steve Morris and some of those guys were all around that area. Not at that time, but and so I was thinking about going there. What would have happened if I'd gone there instead? And it's fun to think about, but at the same time, I mean, your path is your path. You've made your choices, and you keep moving forward. And I'm just the opportunities that have been afforded to me with the path that I've taken are just unbelievable. I mean, I was telling my wife the other day that Larry Carlton was back at the studio, video studio here. We were doing some videos, and it's like I listened to this guy when I was growing up, and he was one of my heroes. And it's like this is the dream. I've always wanted to be Larry Carlton, and so now to run into him at NAMM shows, and I won't say we're buddies, but
Sure.
just to know people like that and get to spend time with them, and to how did this even happen? How blessed am I that this is the world that I live in? It's so exciting to me. It's so fun.
Well, to your point again, there's an inordinate amount of talent that has been generated in the Sweetwater multiverse, from its very beginnings to people that are still there, that have gone out to do other things, that have started other companies. I mean,
Mhm.
when you talk about being around, sort of like it has the same gravitational pull, I always tell people, as the Sunset Strip did in California in the late 70s and early 80s. I mean, it's the same. you everybody who's anybody at some particular point in time has been associated with, involved with, come through or gone around this crazy entity in the middle of Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I mean, you've been, and again, you've been there the majority of the time. So it's got to be this amazingly humbling things to look at as you see who comes through the doors, goes through the doors, comes back. I mean, it's amazing. But throughout all of your conversations, we've talked about the music journey. Was there a time, because it didn't sound like there was, but I would find it hard to believe that there wasn't a time where you thought, I want to be a rock star. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go be.
Okay.
Was that? And then, so you have that goal. What's that transition where you're like, maybe rock star is not for me and I'm going to go do something else?
Yeah. So, you mentioned Kiss.
Yes.
When I was very young, I got pneumonia, and so I was stuck at home for a couple of weeks. You know, you can't go to school with that.
Mm.
And my mom, bless her, brought home a brand new copy of an album that has just come out that was called Kiss Alive.
Yes.
And so played it on the console record player
Best mom ever.
over and over and over and over. And you know, I mean that started the rock star dreams, right? That was probably what helped push me toward picking up guitar. That and you know, in the '70s was the arena rock era, and
Mm-hmm.
so there was, I mean, it was huge, right? I mean, everybody from,
Yep.
well, I mean, we all know the
Everybody.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all know the list, you know, and so that eventually led me to starting guitar. Of course, I mean that's the dream, right? To be a, a rock star. Um, you know, I born and raised in Jamestown, North Dakota, small town, about 12,000 people, I think. And the nearest place you could really go see a concert was Minneapolis, which was 350 miles away, you
Jeez.
know. And so I just wasn't really in that industry. I wasn't really part of it. There weren't a lot of musicians in town. My brother started playing drums, and we got a couple other guys from school. One guy played bass, another guy played guitar, you know, and we just put a band together and started doing it. And we were rock stars in our mind, you know,
Yes.
doing that. But I eventually, after going on the road and doing all that, I just realized that I wanted to take a little different path. I wanted to, I wanted my life to be music, but I also saw some of the things that were associated with that lifestyle and the things that were part of that wasn't for me,
Yeah.
wasn't the right path for me to pursue. And so, you know, I mean, I'd still love to have opportunity to go out and play my music. To me now, it's more, I just want to get out and play my music a little bit more and record more and do more gigs and you know, just share that. I
Mm.
think has become the part of it, and I'm pretty content. I don't know when you kind of realize that, either flip the switch or you don't, but I think if you don't, it's hard to move past that. And it was pretty easy for me, really, to
Yeah.
realize that
It seems
there's
like it. It seems like you're
other paths.
happy with all those decisions, understandably so. And again, if everybody's Gene Simmons, then no one's Gene Simmons, right? So it's like there's people that are cut for that life and all the things that come with it, and folks that ultimately that doesn't have to be the only journey for music. It may be where it starts, but it goes other places. So one of the areas we haven't talked about, and I'm curious too, if you're going to be doing any more of this, is you're an author. Obviously, you're a
Mhm.
well-published author. You have many books, and you share all this information. Do you find your love of books um, fueled that, or is it your love of sharing? Because I know you have both when it comes
Mhm.
to having written the books. And follow-up question, with content, horrible word, the way that it is now, any future plans on writing a book, or is it writing books kind of passe and it's just going to all be video and audio books anyway? So,
Interesting questions, all of those. So let's see. I am still a voracious reader. I read about 100 books a year
wow,
and an endless number of magazine articles. Well, they're online now, but you
sure.
know, an endless number of that kind of things. I mean, I'm still a voracious reader in all different types. I read nonfiction, I read fiction, I read science fiction, I read mysteries, I read horror. I read, you know, I mean, the whole gamut. It's if it's well written, I'm fascinated by it. Um, I learned that I really enjoy writing as well, probably just growing out of that. Everything I've done has been, you know, music
Yeah.
or guitar tone book, and I did a book on, I did a Pro Tools handbook, I did an acoustics book, and some of those kind of things. I don't know anymore that releasing a book like that is, in paper, is as valuable of an endeavor as it once was. But we've started a new Sweetwater publishing thing here.
Oh,
Craig
wow.
Anderton has been doing books through Sweetwater. And they're interesting because for the kind of books that he's doing, he can update them. So
Mm.
he's got a Studio One tips book, and every time there's a new version of Studio One, he updates the book, and you get a free copy of the updated version, which is to me a pretty fascinating idea. That's all Craig thinking of that kind of stuff. Craig's so brilliant. Um, Side note, the
Yeah.
very first NAMM show I mentioned I went to,
Yeah.
one of the first appointments I went into, I walk in this little room, they have these booths at the show, and you go in the room and they'll give you private demos of stuff or whatever. And I sit down and there's this guy sitting next to me, and I look over and lo and behold, it's Craig Anderton.
Wow.
And I've worshipped Craig. I mean, I started reading his articles
I think we
in
all
Guitar
have. Yeah.
Gear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, hey, Mr. Anderton, I'm Mitch Gallagher. I'm the new technical editor at Keyboard. And he turns to me and he goes, oh, you're the guy who's editing my articles. I'm like, oh man,
Oh,
oh. I'm telling
I
the story, and he was kidding. I mean, he was totally kidding.
sure.
And Craig and I are best friends, and laugh about that. I mean, but it was like he scared me half to death. And then he broke up laughing, and it was, it was so cool. But anyway, um, yeah, great guy, great people. Um, I have been interested or leaning maybe in the direction of doing something again. And I don't know what that is. I am fascinated by creativity.
Hmm.
I read a lot of books on creativity and artists and writers and musicians and composers and just all of that process fascinates me. So I don't know, maybe I'll think about something on those lines or whatever, something a little different from what I've done, because I do enjoy that process. And I think part of it is to get back very roundabout way to your question is I've also done a lot of teaching in
Yeah,
my
a
career.
ton.
So when I went back to school, after being on the road and I went back to school, they realized at the college that actually I knew more about some of the stuff than some of the teachers did. And so they brought me in to teach labs and to proctor exams and to do all those kind of things. And so I started teaching there, and then also started teaching guitar lessons at the local store. And from there, I've done a lot of teaching. We have a branch of Indiana University and Purdue University that's here in Fort Wayne, and they have quite a nice music technology program. And so I've taught a number of classes there. I've done master classes, all those kind of things. So to me, a lot of the writing is an extension of that teaching.
Hmm.
And like you said, sharing and educating and helping people make better music.
I mean, and let me just, I'm going to look, I'm not ignoring him. I'm looking at the camera and you. I mean, I can attest as someone that has access to Mitch, maybe like some of you may not. He's never shied away from helping me answer any question. And let me tell you about how stupid you can feel when you're asking Mitch Gallagher a question, because he has all the good answers. Like,
Oh, right.
he knows. So you're like, crap. I'm going to, like, when it's bad, it's like, I got to email Mitch. Ah, shit. Okay. He's going to be like, how did you get your job, Rick? It's like, I don't know, sir. I won a lottery. No, but so this is how I
It's
kind of
never
want.
like no, it's never like that though, because
I
nobody
know,
knows everything. I mean,
but
you
that's
learn by asking, and I ask a lot of questions.
you again. It is. I have never seen you stray away from anything or anyone that needs help or question in this. I mean, it's very humbling and it's very inspiring to the rest of us. Just so you know, I mean, Duck,
Wow,
here comes some love. If you're going to set role models, you can't pick a better one than Mitch Gallagher. It's just that simple.
wow. Well,
But here's as we wind this down, I could talk to you for 7 hours, but neither one of us can do that because both of our bosses are going to get angry. All right. The creativity component of your life is so obvious. So I think a lot of people might find themselves in this exact same situation. So, for instance, for you, you have not only your work responsibilities, which include a lot of those creative responsibilities or opportunities as well. You've got content you're doing, you're writing books, maybe you're hosting a clinic, you're doing So, how do you prioritize all of the? I mean, creative people want to do all the creative things right now. Everybody is their own George Lucas. They already have you have your
yep.
own Skywalker ranch, and you're like, I'm going to do it all. But how do you not lose your mind and go crazy? And follow-up question: finish anything? Because it's really easy to start everything. It's super hard to finish anything. What's your process for mitigating your own creativity?
Well, first of all, who says I'm not crazy or panicking?
Uh,
It you have to be organized, and it just as much
When
as
you say
anything.
organized, though, do you have are there certain things you do every day, regardless of what the creative project is? So whether you're working on music or a book, are there just things maybe they're not even music? Are they just life related where it's like, this is something that is a non-negotiable? I get up and I spend time with my wife or I go here. I mean, are there just certain parts of your life that don't shake no matter what you're involved in?
No, it is very fluid,
It is.
and
Okay.
it's based on what's got a deadline, probably as much as anything.
Fair.
I
Yeah.
am super blessed to have an amazing, supportive wife who understands. And
Well, she's creative too. So it's
she
two
is, yeah,
creatives in one
yeah.
roof. It's amazing you
She's
guys
also, yeah,
don't
yeah.
live in a
She's a
shack down by the river. I mean, the two of
well,
you
we
could
don't
probably take the
because
world over.
we don't because she's a brilliant designer,
Yeah,
and so
exactly. Ugh.
she does the home design stuff and has been a designer and has had boutiques and things where she's into that. And she also played guitar in high school, so she understands the music thing. And actually, she was taking piano lessons. We got a piano, and she's doing some of that. So she understands the music side of it. She's got that whole side to her as well. So having a great partner is
Mm,
a huge part of that.
preach.
But it really is it's what's hottest right now, kind of thing. I wish I could say that I'm that disciplined and that organized that no, there's just always a bunch of stuff and you just do whatever's screaming the loudest.
Do you find that there's any one component of all the creative endeavors that you attack more fervently than others, or they all get the same treatment? Like, would you rather be playing guitar than writing a book, or would you rather be doing a video than teaching a class, or do you just take the opportunity and go, well, this is what I'm doing, I'm going all in?
That's the
That's it.
latter. Yeah, it's this is what I'm doing, so I'm going to enjoy this while I'm doing it. And the worst thing for me, it's not bad for me to have too much to do. It's bad for me to be bored
Mm.
and not have enough to do or enough variety. And so that is one of the blessings I have here at work and at home and with all the other stuff is, man, give me a bunch of stuff to do. I don't want to do one thing. I want to do a bunch of different things. I want to, what's next? What's exciting? What's cool? What can we dig into?
Wow. Okay, so after all this time, now that everything has changed and things are very different, do you ever get tired of seeing your face in a thumbnail on YouTube? And do you ever just log in YouTube and go, ah, shit, I forgot I even did, like, I forgot it, or see a video and be like, when did I even do that? I don't even remember that video.
Yeah, no, do you get tired of? I don't think of it that way.
No.
I don't ego surf and look at it that way. I try to stay up on the current videos, and if there's a specific question that I feel like I should jump in and or something that I should address, then I'm on that. But where it happens is I get a lot of questions from customers,
Yeah.
from, and a lot of times it's, hey, I saw you were using this in this video where you were demoing this. Can you remember what that was or what it, and I'm like, I don't, okay, I got to go back and watch the video and see what it even was or what I was talking about. And then I'm like, oh yeah. And then I'll remember, because um, I can't store all that in my head, and so it's the new stuff comes in and the other stuff runs out your ears, and it's a constant drinking from the fire hose with new products that are coming in and learning about them. And that you mentioned getting stuff early. Well, it's really cool to get stuff early, and I love that. It's so fun, but that also means that a lot of times you don't have a manual, you don't have. You're kind of
Yeah.
flying blind with a lot of that stuff, and so I have to make room for that by letting go of some of the other
Mm.
stuff that's going on. I have I'm blessed with a very good short-term memory or medium to short-term memory to where I can sit down and go through something and get the points and also using what we talked about earlier, parse all that down into what I feel are the important things to convey and remember and talk about. And so I see comments where people are like, "Oh, he's reading a script," or "It's great when he's scripting." I very rarely use a script.
No.
Very, very rarely.
Yeah.
Most of it is top ahead, and so I have to pull the stuff in and hold it and send it back out. Um, but actually, now I have to admit that I forgot what your question was.
Oh, it's all right.
So
Where we ended up was much better. So listen,
I'll just share a quick story with you. I
yeah.
did a seminar at Musicians Institute when I was at EQ magazine. And I sat down with a very famous producer, and I swear, Rick, I asked one question, and he started talking, and he talked for almost 50 minutes. And
Yes.
then he turned to me and he said, "What was the question?"
Yeah. That's my dream podcast. That's
Didn't
my
really
dream.
matter.
So that would be well. Here's. I think this is for me. Nobody knows what's going to happen next, but I mean, there's going to come a day and time where you're going to start the next phase of your journey, and with all of these things sort of in your life and on your periphery, I'm going to say it. I mean, there may be a day when Mitch isn't at Sweetwater anymore. I'm not
Oh,
wishing that, but
heaven forbid.
yeah, I don't think you'd know what to do. I think you'd probably have a panic attack, but that day will come. Do you, I, I don't see a time where you're going to look at any of this as this was my job. Now I do something else. I feel like that you are one of the few people that chose wisely, and
Hmm.
everything in your life that you're doing, whether it's for financial or anything or just for fun, these are all things you wanted to do. You're kind of living the dream in a lot of ways. Do you feel that many of the components of where your life is now will be the same until there's no more Mitch and you're on the other side and we've all got to meet you there? You ever
Yeah,
see a time where
exactly.
you slow down? No?
I don't know why. I mean, this is what I love doing. Doing what I love doing. It's like if I wasn't at Sweetwater, I'd still be checking
Right.
out gear and still be making music and still be playing and hopefully still be able to have contact with cool people and do the whole thing. I mean, what else would I do? This is my vocation, but it's also my hobby. It's my passion. And when you're passionate about something, I don't think you just turn that off.
Mm,
I don't think it also, I don't know that I'd say that I chose all this stuff. A lot of this stuff just the opportunity was there and I said yes. I mean, in 2009, the folks here at Sweetwater are like, oh, there's this new YouTube thing and it's kind of starting to happen. I don't know, maybe we should do a video or something. And they went around the building and I'm not going to do a video. No way you're pointing a camera. I'm not doing a video. And they came to me and like, I'll try. I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah.
And 3,000 videos later, here I am, and so much stuff has been like that. It's like, we need a book on, getting started making music. And I'm like, oh, I'll give it a shot. And so I wrote my first book and, along the way that happened. And, the other night I got a call saying, we're doing this show down at the Grand Wayne Theater, which is like our local big event thing here in Fort Wayne, and we need a band to play this. Do you have a band? I'm like, well, yes. So then the next day I'm calling people saying, hey, I need a singer. I need a, you know,
Yeah.
and that's just the way that so much of it works. So to say that I chose the stuff that I do, I mean, yes, I chose to say yes, but it's not like I said, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do videos for YouTube and I'm
Right.
going to write books and it doesn't work that way.
I feel like the lesson there is you just didn't say no. See, anyone could have come along and given you an opportunity, and you could have been like pass. And I'm sure there are opportunities you've passed on, but it's very clear just from the output of your life and your career that you've said yes far more times than you've said no.
Yeah.
And
I mean, and
I think we're all
you hear that from so
we're
many, I hear that
better
from so
for
many
it.
musicians and, it's like, how do you have a career? You say yes,
Yeah.
you know, until you can say no. But, uh, I don't know if something sounds fun or interesting, why wouldn't you give it a try? Why wouldn't you? I don't know. It just, again, I think that'd be a shame
Yeah. That
to
yeah.
not do
I,
something for whatever reason.
okay. So last question, I promise. So I know you are going to find it hard to believe, but there somewhere in the online watching this or listening to this right now is the next Mitch Gallagher, is the next
Mm.
young Mitch Gallagher. What's that one piece of invaluable advice that you didn't get that you had to learn yourself that you could pass on to that next Mitch Gallagher?
Wow.
Yeah. I'm
That's
sure
a,
you got all kinds of crappy advice, and I'm sure you learned all kinds of things the right way, but I'm sure at some point in time you had a moment in the mirror, you're like, well, I wish someone would have told me about that yesterday. It's like, okay, and you have this revelation. Is
yeah,
there anything you
yeah,
can think of? And it can be it doesn't have to be specific to music, anything.
yeah. I will tell you that, pretty early on, maybe it was when I don't know even when it occurred to me. Um, I think you reach a point, or I reached a point where I realized that it's not about me. You know, uh, a comment that I get a lot is your interviews are so great because you let the people talk. I'm like, well, yeah, it's not about me. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say about Steve Vai's guitar playing. They want to hear what Steve Vai has to say about
Mm,
Steve Vai's guitar playing. Why would I talk? And I realized that with so much of the stuff, whether it is when I was in sales, selling stuff, it's not about me. It's not about what I like. It's about what's right for the customer. And when I'm writing an article, it's not about me and what I know and proving what I know and all that. It's about how can we help? Why do I care? That has been a catchphrase that I tell all the writers here. I tell all the other content creators. I used to tell this to freelance writers when they were working with me at EQ and Keyboard. They'd write an article for me. I'm always like, man, I'm going to look at your article. I'm going to sit down with a red pencil and I'm going to go, why do I care? Why do I care? Why do I care? If I don't care, it's getting a red line through it and it's getting edited out. And I think I have approached my whole career that way is why do I care? And if it's just noise, if it's just superfluous, I approach my composing that way. Why do I care? Oh boy, I could do this sweep there, even though I'm not a sweep picker, but why? That's not what the piece is about. That, you get the point.
Yeah.
I think the ability to self-edit is tremendously important in any type of creative role. And so learning your place in the creative process and being able to self-edit yourself is so, and it's very difficult. It's very hard because, oh man, I got this cool lick. I got to get this lick in here. And then you listen to it and you're like, oh no, you're just doing that to force that in there, or whatever. I used to run into a lot of, when I was editing a lot of articles at the magazines, a lot of writing about writing. So I'd get an article and it'd start out with, well, I woke up at 7:00 and it was kind of sunny out and I thought I'm going to write today. And then there was a knock on the door and a box was waiting on the front and I opened the box up and I'm like, no, I don't care. Don't care. Don't care. Don't care. Don't care. We are talking about this product. Now let's talk about this product, so that whole thing is, I don't know if that specifically answers your question.
It totally does.
That's my philosophy on a lot of that stuff is just ask yourself, why do I care?
See, and you just wrapped it up so nicely. That's why you're the EGOT. That's why you get to do all these things. Listen, so again, Duck, here comes some love. The fact of the matter is you are a legend in our industry and we are all incredible. Well, you did fine. You do that. That's very nice. But everybody can unanimously agree on the fact that when you share information or that when you have something to say or when you're going to talk to someone, it's worth listening to. That's why we care. So you're part of the reason we care. So I'll bring it back around to your advice. So thank you, for taking some time out for us today. And you know that I love you. We love you. If there's anything you ever need or we can do for you, the answer is yes. Just phone call or email away. I'm going to turn this way for 5 seconds and say goodbye to these people, and then you'll be free to go on your way. So give me 1 second.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, people. You were fortunate enough to sit in on that conversation with me. And like I said, everybody's new best friend, previous best friend, but new bester friend, Mitch Gallagher. So we want to thank you for taking time out to listen. We know you had other things to do, but I keep bringing it up. There is no better way to avoid your work responsibilities than to lock yourself in the men's lavatory and watch the Sound Horizons podcast on YouTube or listen to it on any of the other streaming devices that we're on. So with that being said, we look forward to you listening to us talk to other amazing and cool people on the next episode. We hope you and yours are doing incredibly well. And on behalf of myself and the Sound Horizons podcast, brought to you by TuneTrack, we want to thank you for your time, and we will talk to you in the very near future. Have a great day.